Hello there, it's Beck and Deb,
Hi.
and welcome to this week's show. I was going to say live, but we're not live this week
Well, it's
because
live right this minute.
it's live as we record. We are live, but yeah, we've had some problems in recent weeks with the internet, possibly due to the number of people being online, and we know that a lot of the stuff we've been sharing hasn't either been picked up by the recording or people haven't been able to hear us. So we decided to give it a go, kind of pre-recording it and popping it out on YouTube on a Wednesday evening. And our little plan is that we're going to go and set up a watch party on Facebook so that we can join you live to watch it afterwards.
Hello, if you're watching the watch
So yes, if we're now in the watch
party.
Hooray! So we just thought we would try something different with this and see how that goes. So thank you very much for joining us and bearing with us while we try out our different changes.
Indeed.
As always, it's nice to start with letting you know what's coming up, because we're always up to something, as you know. And our next most exciting thing that we're looking forward to is our 30-day money exploration. So we've got a 30-day program called Small Change, and it starts on Monday the 4th of May. And just as a very special offer, the first 5 days of that is entirely free.
Yeah, so jump in and do that.
Dive in and join in with that. Whatever whatever your thoughts are on that, because it would be great to have you.
It would.
And then if you do, either if you already know you want to join in for the whole thing, then go ahead to the website and do that. If you're not sure and want to, trial out the 5 days first, then that's fine too. And if you absolutely just want to do the 5 days, that's great too. It's all on the table. So we would love to have you as part of that, and you can find out everything you need to know on our website.
Playing around with some of the interviews and some of the things that we're going to do in there.
Videos,
very excited.
And, yes, it's going to be a fantastic few days together. So yeah, go and find out on the website all about that.
And some of the things that we're up to, we have got a mini mentoring program that's going to be starting in May. And before all this strange stuff started to happen, we were going to have a hangout here at our farmhouse. We're going to have a couple of people come and stay with us and have a couple of days, which was something, we absolutely just love to do. Obviously, we're not allowed to do that anymore. So we have taken our hangout online now, which does mean we have been able to open it up to a few more people. So if that's something that you might be interested in, then please do. You can go to our website and find out, or you can send us a message or get in touch with us and ask us about that. It'd be great to have you with us. And I did say a little bit about the mini mentoring, but the other thing that we're really, really excited about is that we've decided for quite some time we haven't done any one-to-one mentoring. But when we were talking, we've been having so many conversations with people since lockdown, as I'm sure you guys have, that, the feedback we've been having is that people would really, really love some one-to-one mentoring with us. So we are going to be putting out some one-to-one mentoring. So that means there's no start date. You can do it whenever you like. And if you want a trial of it, you can join the mini mentoring if you know that it's for you, because honestly, it is just I know everything's my favourite thing.
We just love our jobs, don't we?
We do. No, it is a particular favourite. We do. It's just wonderful. The mentoring is such fun. That's for us anyway.
Well, yeah.
I have no idea what it's like for you. No, it's really good. And so if you've got any questions about that, feel free to be in touch, because it's good fun. So.
It absolutely is, yeah. So yeah, like with any of that stuff, it would be great if you want to join in.
You know where we are, reach out and speak to us.
Yes, absolutely. So on with our show. As always, we're going to start with living, learning and loving. So last week when we did our live show that didn't record very well, we thought we'd come back to those topics and the things that we were talking about on that evening, in case people missed it. And I know a couple of people had particularly been interested in the topics and question we were looking at. So living and learning is kind of sort of from last week, but it's interesting to me because actually in the last week since that show, for me, it's been very similar, my living and learning. So it's actually a kind of 2-week living and learning. And for me, that has very much been around kind of grounding and trusting. So what do I mean by that? For me, grounding is that word that we throw out and we mean to be able to come back and remember what we're pointing to. That, in any given moment, what we experience is our thinking in that moment. We don't experience our circumstances directly. We don't experience somebody else's behaviour directly. We experience what we are thinking in that moment. And like to kind of be able to come back and remember that whatever is happening, that for me is grounding. That's coming back to the firm ground that we can stand on. The one thing we know we can stand sure in is that that is what is happening. And I've really in the last couple of weeks seen that again and again, how we're actually self-correcting in that way, that as we look in this direction and start to see the truth of that's how we work, we come back to that more and more and more. And, you know, I don't know about anyone else, but because at the moment when we're recording this, we're about, 5.5 weeks into lockdown because of the coronavirus. We're kind of being asked to stay home, to distance from other households and that sort of thing. There's been some moments in that for me, I know for Deb, and I know for other people in our household and people we speak to. And it's really, really nice. And it's just come to me again and again and again throughout that I have this firm foundation to come back to. I have this solid ground that I can plant my feet on and know that in any given moment, I'm just feeling my thinking in that moment and it passes. Like it's not fixed. Whatever I feel here and now isn't going to be my feelings forever. It's not going to be what I feel for the rest of my life. It's probably going to pass in a minute or two. And, you know, sometimes if it hangs around for an hour or two, perhaps, but it passes. And for me, kind of the grounding that I've really seen again and again and again is that. And the kind of trusting part for me is that that will come to me. Like I can really trust that that will come to me. That like in a given moment, if I'm struggling with something, I don't need to fight with that struggle because something will kind of come to me, you know, whatever it might be, a reminder that that's how it works, an idea to go and have a cup of tea and take some space for a minute. I can trust that something will come through me in that way. So that's kind of been, you know, I touched on that a little bit in the show last week that didn't record so well, but actually what's been so interesting to me is how that's come even more in the last week. Yeah. So I'm kind of glad we were redoing the show a little bit because it's like I haven't got anything different. It's actually more of the same for me in the last week.
Well, I know that some of you are aware that I started doing some gardening during lockdown. Something was I never thought I meant, I have to say. So I've got involved with this the floral project. And if you want to find out any more about that, feel free to ask because I can point you in the direction of that. It's open up to anyone to join in, and it's just about growing flowers in your back garden to give to people to cheer them up. But gardening has never been my thing, but it's just I've absolutely loved seeing how many metaphors just work so well with the garden, because I've bought some plants that were like small plants that I planted in my garden, and I've also planted out some seeds, and it's been really interesting, like planting the seeds and then watching, you know, kind of going back every 5 minutes to see have they grown yet, have they grown yet? Or, you know, each day and watering them. You know, I took time and I prepared the ground. I got myself a sieve thing and I sieved my peat, compost, whatever, mud stuff, sieved the dirt. I kind of prepared it, you know, I made sure it was in the right, you know, the right way, and put them in the little pots and then put the seeds in. And to me, it's really, really, really been reminding me of how we work, how this understanding works, the fact that, you know, we can learn so much from nature because we are nature, and we can watch it. And I've watched these seeds and I've watched, you know, looking at them, they all looked the same. And then I put them in this earth, and some of them very, very quickly, literally within a day or two, you know, I'd got some little things like little green shoots and little leaves, and others that were the same seeds, same starting, appeared to be the same circumstances, nothing. And then a few days later, you know, and so some of them are kind of like this tall and some of them are this tall. And I see that with myself, with this understanding, I hear something, you know, my mind or whatever, there's some ground in here, and these seeds of understanding are flung at me, and some of them literally within minutes, ping, they land, and there's something's growing and something's changing. And another time, you know, 2 years later, still nothing there. And then all of a sudden there's a little leaf, something changing, a shoot appearing. So my living and learning this week has really been around how much we can learn from watching nature, because we are nature. You know, we are that, and it really reflects, it gives us such beautiful metaphors to watch and see. You know, the hope, the joy, the excitement when it happens, the slight disappointment when, you know, you've just day after day after day after day, you've just got earth and nothing appears to have happened from it. And there's so many things in my life that I can see are like that. You know, I plant and I plant and I plant, and some things literally within minutes of planting them, there's some beautiful results already, some beautiful things already happening. Some things I plant and I water and I nurture, nothing, and all of a sudden there is. And sometimes there just never is. That's it. You plant, you nurture, you water, and nothing happens ever. And I just really see that's life. But for all those seeds that I plant, you know, already I've had some early flowers come on those already. You know, we've seen new shoots of leaf. My sweet peas have started to get those little things that wrap around the sticks, and they're headed in the right direction. And I just feel that in life, it's a great metaphor for life. You know, it teaches there's patience, and there's, you know, keep going, because something will happen, and maybe it won't be what you first planted, what you first thought it would be, but something's going to come from it. So I think for me, my living and learning has really been kind of watching my garden and seeing the millions of beautiful metaphors.
Yeah, and I think as you were sharing there, what came to is the metaphor of, like, when I was talking about grounding, like when as Deb started, the first part of her project was to build a kind of raised flower bed in our garden, and it's quite big. I can't remember what the dimensions are now, but in the Facebook group that Deb's a part of, that's kind of supporting people who are doing this project, there was all this kind of advice as to how to, you know, set up the perfect flower bed, so that the, you know, the ground is exactly the right kind of ground to bring flowers, you know, to give them a really good start in life. And so we spent, you know, Deb spent maybe a week or two building that, didn't you, and kind of putting the right layers in and watering it every day.
Had to go and collect stingers, and I got stung so many times.
Watering cardboard, and, you know, all sorts of crazy things.
And then collecting horse manure.
Yeah, there's just been a whole lot of stuff that's kind of gone into that ground to make it what should be really fertile ground. And like, for me, that kind of, the phrase I was using about grounding, kind of really, to me, that's something in that kind of the fertile ground that Deb's now planting her flowers in, is, to my mind, what we're pointing to metaphorically, kind of spiritually.
It's kind of what we are at our core, isn't it? That we're amazing kind of fertile ground.
We're doing whatever it is we're doing to kind of, I don't know, encourage that fertile ground, maybe. I think for me, the being in this conversation is that fertile ground, isn't it? It's the, you know, we water that ground, or, you know, we hopefully get some sun on it, or whatever it might be, so that at some point, exactly like Deb was saying there, when you're kind of planting your seeds, some of them might not come to anything, but there's fertile ground there, so they've got the best possible chance, you know, if they are going to. So that really, like, as you were saying, oh, there's loads of beautiful metaphors in nature. I was like, yes,
so it is.
Fertile ground.
and the how much of it isn't down to us, you know, with the gardening. You know, I have worked quite hard, like you say, with building the flower bed and sieving soil. You know, I never saw me as a person who would sit and sieve soil, you know, but it was great learning for me, for my patience, and also, you know, the fact, there was work to do. I did do that, and it kind of reminds me of the show up and take responsibility, and then know you're not responsible, because I put these seeds in that soil, and it feels to me like whatever happens with those seeds is kind of somebody else's business. You know, those seeds are like little tiny little amazing, I don't even know, they're amazing little power balls, aren't they, that have been packed with stuff that can just do amazing things, and I have no idea, you know, which ones of those are going to come to that, which ones of those are going to explode with beauty and colour, and we've planted some vegetables in with I got into it, and some vegetables have sneaked in there as well. So which ones of these are going to give so much pleasure from the beauty and the colours and the gorgeous flowers that they bring, and how many of those are going to nourish us with the vegetables that they're going to bring forth. And that bit looks like that's not down to me. No matter what I do, that is not down to me. And you can't tell. My granddad used to grow runner beans, and years and years and years ago I was quite interested in what he was doing with his runner beans. And he would have the seeds. He would always get his the seeds from the year before and have them, and there would be these gorgeous shiny seeds, like little bean looking things that were pinks and blacks and all and mottledy colours over them, and you couldn't tell when you were looking at them for all the world which ones were going to reap tons and tons of lovely beans for you to eat, and which ones were going to sit in the soil and do nothing. And it's just not ours to know that. We just don't get to choose that. And even that's a metaphor even with ourselves, stuff we are dying to know and dying to be good at, we just don't know if that's ours to do or not. So coming back to your kind of the trust and the grounding, I see, whatever it is we do in life, we plant the seeds and we trust. And then we come from this place within us, which is like that amazing fertile ground. We just let, what's going to grow is going to grow. And it's a beautiful place to live from, I think.
Yeah. So who are we loving this week, Deb?
Does it have to be a who? I think for me, I am loving the nature and the garden and what I am learning from all I'm doing here, like moving into a completely new area. And if you've been a gardener all your life, you're probably but yeah.
They've just got into the game.
I have. So I'm loving nature and what nature shows me and gives to me, just how giving and forgiving and beautiful nature is.
I think for me, I'm loving this week all of the people that are on our relationship
school.
Oh
yeah,
we are just having a fabulous. I think we're on week 5 this week, aren't we? Is that true? I feel like it is. Week 4. I've lost track because it's just been. We're about halfway through, and we're having 2 calls a week, 2 live calls a week on that program, and we just have an amazing group of people that turn up each call. And
well, they are nature, aren't they? I've just said
there you
go.
Nature,
so that as well.
Yeah, they're also part of nature. So yeah, I'm absolutely loving our relationship school pupils.
Me too. And if you missed the boat on relationship school and you're kind of wishing you didn't because of what we're saying, drop us a message, because we've got some ideas about how we're going to carry on with relationship schools. Is that a bit of a spoiler alert? Was I allowed to say that?
Who knows?
Well, I did.
Turns out you did. That's cool. Yes. Right then. So our question this week is, how do I change my thoughts and behaviours? And this came from, I think, a show a couple of weeks ago, that as we were kind of talking, somebody kind of heard what we were sharing and say, I totally can see that, what's causing my feelings is my thoughts. So how do I change my thoughts and behaviours? And it's a really good question, isn't it? Because as you kind of see, that's what causes me to feel a certain way. That's what gives me my experience. Then it's kind of an obvious next step, isn't it? Well, in that case, I can change, I want to change my thoughts so that I have a better experience, or I want to change my behaviours so that I'm being, whatever it might be, kinder to somebody, kinder to myself. So it's a fairly it's a logical next question from kind of what we share. But for me, it's about kind of seeing that none of what we're sharing here is suggesting that you need to change your thoughts and behaviours. That actually it's actually simpler than that, if you like. We don't always like simple, do we? We like to complicate things.
We want control.
Yeah, but it's very much about the kind of, it's simpler. It's seeing that as we get to understand that our thoughts create our experience, we just aren't as drawn into those stories and those thoughts as we used to be. We don't get quite so het up about them, because there's something about seeing that we are not our thoughts that gives us just a little element of separation, that we don't have to kind of believe them or act out from them, because that's, you know, that's where our behaviors come from. When we do believe a thought to be true, we act. Our behavior comes from what makes sense with that thought. You know, if you have the thought, if Deb doesn't like me, I need to work harder, then it's going to make sense. If I believe that's true, it's going to make sense to me to work harder and burn myself out. But when I see that, you know, that's a thought I don't have to believe. I have no idea if Deb likes me. I probably do have an idea.
You might do.
But if I didn't, you know, I'm making that thought up. I don't really know how Deb feels moment to moment, because we all have changing feelings and thought. So it doesn't, you know, when I'm believing that thought, it kind of makes sense to behave in that way. But when I see that that thought isn't something I have to believe, I don't have to behave in that way. And so it's much, much simpler than having to change our thoughts and behaviours. It's much more about looking back to where those behaviours and those thoughts are created, to see that our experience comes to us moment by moment. Our feelings come to us through that thinking in that moment. And the more we understand that, and the more times we see that, the more places we see that, the less we're kind of drawn into those thoughts and behaviours. And then a kind of natural byproduct is that they change. Like, that's been, you know, our experience, I think, isn't it fair to say, that the byproduct of understanding that that's the process that's kind of happening for each and every one of us, they kind of just change by themselves. Things start to drop away that, you know, a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, I'd never imagined could be different for me.
Yeah, what's coming to me when you're sharing this, and within the question itself, is like, how do I change my thoughts and my behaviours? I think as human beings, right from school days, really, it's kind of, we're taught that if we do something wrong, we are at fault and we have control to change that and make it different. And so we're kind of taught from an early age that we have control. And so it's an obvious question, like you say, when we begin to see that our behaviour comes from the thinking that we're believing is true moment to moment. It's like, okay, so how do I control my thinking so that I can control my behaviour? How do I do this? Because all of us, you know, with the best will in the world, I have seen times, I can't think of a specific example, so I'm just going to kind of make something up, but it's like, I've thought of an example. In the mornings during lockdown, my partner isn't going to work anymore. He's at home, and he's a builder, and used to go out the house every morning, and he's not going out the house now. So he's lying in bed while I'm getting up and getting dressed, and he just stays in bed a little bit longer than me, because he always used to get up before me, but he's staying in bed a little bit longer than I am these days. So when I get up in the morning and I go into the bathroom, invariably I drop the toothpaste, or my moisturizer jumps off the shelf and bangs onto the floor. And just laughingly and jokingly, he kind of says to me, can't you be a bit quieter in the bathroom? And weirdly, the harder I try to be quiet in the bathroom, the more that it just feels like the soap jumps off the side, and everything bangs and crashes the minute I walk into there. And it's like, I can remember, even as a child, being told to do things differently, and actually wanting to do something different, and just not being able to do something different. And I find it the same. It's kind of like, I have no intention of making a lot of noise and waking him up and disturbing him, and yet somehow what I do, the way I behave, what happens, that's what plays out. And it feels, and on the mornings when he had, when he used to go out to work, I used to feel I was perfectly quiet in the shower, I didn't make a sound. So it's kind of, and I think this question, like, how do I change my thoughts and behaviours, it comes from this place that for so long we have been told, and we truly believe ourselves, that we absolutely have control over these things, and it's down to us to do it, and if we don't do it, there's something wrong with us. And one of the things when you come across this understanding, I think that can be a little bit hard to swallow, is to kind of see, do you know what? You do not have control in that way. Because I don't know about you, and I know that was a funny example, but how many times have you, do you do something that you can absolutely see isn't even to your advantage, but try as you might, you can't do it differently. How do we get, we have too much alcohol, we do drugs, we overeat, we do, because we just have these habits and these behavior and this stuff that we do. And I think, and that sounds like really, really bad news. And it's like, oh, rubbish, then I'm kind of stuck with how it is. But exactly like Beck was saying, the real magic here, which I think it's not necessarily an easy sell, and it's not necessarily what we want to hear, because it sounds so much easier to just, right, tell me how I control it, and I'm going to control it, and things are going to be fine. And it's like, by now, if you've lived life as, however long you've lived life, I'm sure by now you've worked out that's not how it happens. We don't just have control, sort it out, done and dusted. Just doesn't work like that. But there is absolutely brilliant news here, because exactly what Beck was talking to, what she was saying was that as we understand, as we look in this direction, feels like you want to control it and do it over here, turns out it doesn't work that way. But turns out there is a way it works. Life is weighted in your favor. There is a way to have a fabulous experience of life. And it was really reminding me what I was saying about the seeds and things like that. We plant the seeds, we do what is ours to do. We don't choose which ones come up. And it's exactly the same. But even with the seeds, I'm sure I'm going to have a crop of amazing flowers. I'm sure we're going to eat some of the vegetables that we grow. Something will come of what we've done. And to me, it's the same with my thoughts and my behaviors. If I look in the direction of how is experience created, what is truly going on here, and I look to understand that, some amazing things grow from that. Some beautiful things blossom and flower from that knowing, some that I wouldn't have even believed were possible. And sometimes I still make a noise in the bathroom in the morning when I want to be quiet.
Yeah, it was just coming to me as you were sharing that, like, that our thoughts, our behaviours, if you like, change when something makes sense to us in a new way. When it's like, if it doesn't make sense to me, I know one of the things I used to do was bite my nails, and I just don't anymore. And I don't remember when that changed. I've got no idea, but that just at some point it stopped making sense to me, and now they grow and they look relatively pretty, I think, most of the time. And I don't know when and how, but what I do know is that what changed was it stopped making sense to me to bite them, and now it makes sense to keep them pretty. And there's a really kind of cool story that I remember Deb telling us quite some time ago, of a kind of example of somebody that did something that they didn't even know why they did it. They just did it until suddenly they saw that it didn't make sense anymore. And it was it's a young woman who was cooking Christmas dinner for her family. And she made a very beautiful turkey, as you would at Christmas.
Not my story, but yeah.
Well, I don't know where it came from originally, but it was Deb I heard it from. And and she was making a joint of ham as well to go on the Christmas table. And she was kind of making her ham, and she kind of chopped the two ends off and put it into the dish and into the oven. And her little daughter kind of said, "Oh, Mum, why'd you chop the ends off the ham?" And she said, "Oh, that's just, it's what we do. I got it from your grandmother. I'm not actually sure why. That's just how you cook ham." So the little girl went to her grandma and said, "Grandmother, why does Mum, chop the ends off her ham? Why do we cook ham that way?" And the grandmother kind of said, "Actually, I don't really know. It's just what we've always done. It was my mother who's sitting over in the corner. Great grandma, let's go and ask her." So they kind of go over to great grandma and say, "Well, why do we cook the ham by chopping the ends off?" And she kind of puzzles a little bit and said, "Well, I only used to have a very small oven dish, so it didn't fit, so I had to chop the ends off my ham to fit it in the oven dish." And all of a sudden, these 4 generations of women were kind of like, "Oh, it doesn't make sense to chop the ends of the ham off, because we don't, we've got an oven dish that fits." And it's that, to me, is like, as soon as we see why we do something, or the sense in why we're behaving a certain way, as soon as it makes sense to us behave differently, we just will. And it's the understanding of where these things come from, that they come from our thought in the moment. And, the original woman in the story just had the thought, you have to chop the ends off ham to cook it.
Well, she did. Her hand
And
pan was too small. She had to.
Made
complete sense.
That's what made sense to her. But as you went through those generations, nobody had thought to go, well, why do I behave this way? And obviously ham's fairly inconsequential. But for our own kind of behaviours and thoughts, it's very much seeing that we behave in a way that makes sense to us. And as soon as it doesn't make sense anymore, our behaviour changes. And it stops making sense when we realise that our happiness and our peace doesn't come from the outside. Because as far as I can tell, majority of the behaviours that we do as human beings are in some way or another to feel peace or happiness. Like most of what we do, possibly all of it, but I've not done a full study on that. But I think most of what we're doing out in the world is to feel happy and peaceful and loved. And as soon as we see that we don't need that from outside, that has an impact on our behaviours. We don't have to, there's lots of things I used to do because I thought that was true, and things I don't need to do anymore because I realised that happiness, that peace, that love comes from inside me. And so certain behaviours just do not make sense anymore.
So I guess in some ways, the how do I change my thoughts and behaviours, it is you look to understand the nature of thought, your own nature, to learn to understand yourself and how you go about that and which parts you want to look at. But it is kind of seeing a little bit like the ham pan story, I guess. What stories am I running? What thinking do I have? What beliefs, which is just another fancy word for thoughts. What thoughts have I had that I've made that I've really seen and thought, oh yeah, that's true. That actually, if I just look at it again and kind of go, well, is it true? That maybe it doesn't look the same. So I think we have this idea that we are just going to simply control our thinking and therefore control our behavior. And it doesn't look to me like control in that way is on the table, but it does look to me like understanding. And a little bit like the ham pan story, I think when we take ourselves a little bit lighter and laugh at the thinking that we have kind of taken on in that way and just believed to be true. And one of the things that I found hugely helpful, which if you've been around this understanding, I'm sure you've heard it lots and lots of times before, but it bears repeating here, is, that reminder that just because a thought is in our head, that alone isn't enough to make it real or true. And I, again and again, I kind of have those moments of, wow, I just had a thought there and forgot that I didn't have to take it seriously. I forgot for a minute that just because a thought was in my head doesn't even mean that it's what I actually believe, what I think. It's just this thought that's in my head, and I don't have to believe it. I don't have to listen to it. I don't have to act on it. And we have a whole lot of thinking that totally goes unnoticed to us. And our behaviours arise from that. But to me, the minute that we start to understand the nature of thought and understand those things, we don't have to kind of dig around and work out what every thought is. If I'm aware of a thought and I play around with it and kind of realise that I don't have to believe it, I don't have to follow it, I don't have to act from it, just kind of uncovering that thought seems to be enough to trigger it feels like there's lots of other thinking that's piled on top of that or connected to that, or it feels like when you're knitting and you pull one thread and a ton of other things kind of comes with it. So it's not like we have to go through every single thought we have. It's enough just the thoughts that are visible to you. It seems to me, just looking at the thinking that is totally visible to me and kind of going, well, does it make sense actually? I've just taken that thought, believed it to be true, acted on it. Do I have to do that? And just playing around with it, and seeing, the nature of thought is it comes and goes. It's just like, oh, here's an option, here's an option, here's an option, here's an option, here's another one, and it's kind of like us that kind of says, oh yeah, that one please, that option. And if we kind of look at it and go, actually, is this an option I want? Yeah, maybe not.
It doesn't have to be, does it?
No.
And somehow it's the kind of understanding of that process, and the understanding of that's how it all works, that somehow, I don't know, paradoxically it then means that or certainly this has been my experience, that I have thoughts that I want more often, kind of healthier thoughts, nicer thoughts. You know, I seem to live in a pool of cleaner water, if you like. It's like, now that I've seen where the water comes from, it's cleaner. It's that for me with the kind of thought thing. It's like, my thoughts and behaviours are far nicer than they were 6-7 years ago. I used to live in quite murky waters, and now just by looking to kind of how this works, I just have cleaner waters most of the time. You know, and occasionally the filter might break down. I used to own a fish tank, so I know all about murky water and filters breaking down. But it's sometimes that happens, but then I look back and kind of go, okay, so I see what's happened here. There's thought coming through, and I've taken, for a moment, I've gotten lost and forgotten that. And as I look again to see that, because it is kind of an ongoing thing to me, this isn't like a once is enough kind of thing. It's, I keep coming back to this and looking again. Oh yeah, thought creates my experience. And I just feel like what happens as we understand that is that those thoughts and those behaviours clean themselves up in a way that, you know, I could spend forever trying to change my behaviours, but it's much, much simpler to go to the source and see it from there and kind of understand it that way. Wasn't there a story once about people falling in water?
Yeah, there was.
But I can't remember the full.
It was something that I don't know whether I'll remember it very well. It's something that Jamie Smart actually shared, and I think the story went something like this: that there was a couple who went out for a picnic one day, a really beautiful picnic spot by a river, and they were sat there enjoying their picnic. And the next thing they heard someone shouting, "Help! Help! Help!" who was drowning in the river. So they ran to the river, you know, and started, and the man pulled this person out, and then before they'd got back to their picnic and sat down, they heard someone else shouting. So they went, and you know, after a few minutes, it was like there were just loads and loads of people, and they were just pulling them out and pulling them out and pulling them out. And the next thing, the man just ran off, and you know, his partner who was there, she was kind of like, well, where have you gone? This is ridiculous. You know, there's hundreds of people here that we need to pull out the water. Where have you gone? And she's trying her best to kind of do this. And soon after a few minutes, you know, it kind of stopped, and then her partner came back, and she was like, well, where did you go? What on earth, you know, what were you thinking? Do you know what you left me to do? And he said, well, it stopped, hasn't it? She's, yeah. And he said, well, I went up river to find out, you know, who was throwing these people in and stop them being thrown in, because, you know, and that stopped the problem. And it's a bit like that, isn't it?
That's it. That's the exact story I was thinking of. Cool. I couldn't remember exactly, but yes,
so
it's that.
Kind of when we're downstream, when we're trying to change our behaviours, it's like we've already been thrown in the water. That's already happened. And yeah, our best option here at changing this is to go back to where the people are being thrown in. And that is to go back to look at what creates our experience, you know, what actually creates this. And that is when we go back to, you know, mind, thought and consciousness, how life actually works and how we get to be having the experience that we're having. And if that doesn't mean anything to you and you're kind of looking at the screen going, what? There is one of our YouTube things that maybe we'll put the link to that underneath that, and it's kind of, we answer that question, this understanding in a nutshell. So yeah, you'll be able to find out there if you want to know more about that.
Perfect.
Rather than dive into it now.
Yeah. So that brings us very nicely, I think, onto our topic this week, which is the false high. And this was a topic that I think I picked this one this week off the back of something that came up in a YouTube show, because it's something that I really, really saw a couple of years ago, maybe, around kind of how we often talk in this understanding about kind of look for the feeling, and kind of our feelings tell us where we are. You know, like if we're getting kind of a pretty good feeling, then there's a good chance the quality of our thinking and our experiences is a nice one, and kind of following that feeling. But what I notice sometimes is that we can be quite clever with our feelings, and we can get this kind of false high, if you like, where it feels as though something we're doing, something we're thinking, behavior that we do kind of is good behavior, that it's okay to kind of do that behavior, be that person, because the feeling that comes with it is a good feeling. But actually, you know, sometimes that can be a false feeling, a false kind of high. And very much I saw that, you know, for me around some behavior that I'd been doing, that, you know, and I see it in kind of addict behavior and that sort of thing too, that actually it's like, you know, certain things that I was doing a few years ago, that for a few minutes afterwards I'd be like, yeah, that felt really good, I feel really happy now. And then for weeks or days or hours afterwards I was like, no, I don't feel so great anymore. That kind of initial high feeling.
It's almost like afterwards you wish you hadn't. In the moment, maybe it feels
like,
good or
yeah,
something.
that was nice, enjoyed, you know, whatever that might be.
But it's not really a long-term peace of mind.
No,
thing.
It's not like a kind of that underlying okayness that we feel.
And I think you can even lie to yourself about that. I kind of definitely, like around people with addictions and addicts, we can kind of go, no, I'm okay with it. No, I'm okay with it. But if we actually were totally honest with ourselves, and to me it's like that get to know yourself, isn't it?
Totally, like I've seen that, and I know this is something Lou, many of you will know. Lou has recently had like a kind of a real big insight around her drinking, and I know she kind of said the same, that there was this sort of almost false space of, yeah, no, it's perfect, I'm perfectly fine with how much I drink and when I drink and why I drink. But it was actually like a falseness. It was like a kind of, we can lie to ourselves about that feeling.
Very good at lying to ourselves.
Really trick ourselves.
Can I say for a second, if anyone is watching this and they don't know, they haven't kind of seen Lucy's stuff and they don't know. So Lou is Beck's sister, and she's had a huge insight around her drinking and her alcohol stuff. So we'll put in some links underneath that to some of the stuff she shared around that, because it's literally, it's brilliant, really, and there's some beautiful, powerful stuff to see there. So sorry, carry on.
No, that's fine. I think that's,
we talk about these things, you know, as if
we know who Lucy is.
We absolutely know. You know, why wouldn't you?
But yeah, definitely, we'll make sure that's available. But it's very much that we get that kind of. I know one of the things that I often come back to is that there was a time where I got quite upset with somebody. And for a moment I really wanted to punch them, like I was really upset, and my kind of I know it's rare. I'm sure one or two of you watching have had an urge like that before, but it was like this, I really, obviously not Saint Deborah, but I really had a moment of, I just want to punch them and show them how I feel. But I didn't, because I don't even know why I didn't. It just, that isn't what happened to me. But I was very upset and angry about it. And I was speaking to kind of Deb and Lucy at the time. And what Deb kind of reflected back to me was this, you know, if you had have done that, if you had have punched that person, would you have felt good? And I kind of sat for a minute and thought, I would have done, probably for about a minute, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. And then probably for a very long time afterwards, really not good at all. Whereas what actually happened was that I didn't punch them. I managed to kind of walk away from the situation, and as it stands to this day, I have a very nice relationship with that person. They don't know that I wanted to punch them. But for a moment,
anyone watching this will be thinking, I wonder if it was me.
I feel fairly safe that the person won't watch this. But in that kind of moment when I didn't do that, for a few minutes I was so angry and so not in a good place and not okay with it, but very quickly came to a place of feeling okay and peaceful and happy that I hadn't done that. And it was kind of that opposite, you know, that short-lived false high versus the actual longer term.
I can see, and like watching what happened with Lucy with her stuff as well, I kind of want to say this, in that moment, if you just say you had a punched that person for argument's sake, I think we can also do this other thing with us, this false, no, I am okay with that, and like a justification almost, and kind of try and hold ourselves in that false
Yeah.
high of
Yes.
no, it was the
fine.
right
No,
thing
it
to
was-
do. They deserved it, and I was right to do it, and I should have done it, and I'm glad I did do it.
Yeah.
And you can kind of, to me, the getting to know yourself, you know, we're always pointing to know yourself and know deeper, and part of that is facing those things in ourselves where, and I think there's kind of a little wormy thing going on inside us that we know that isn't true.
Yeah.
And definitely, like the conversations we've had with Lou around her drinking and how it's changed now, she's kind of like, if I'd have been being absolutely authentic and honest when I was saying to you, this is fine and I'm okay and I like it and I'm good with it, it wasn't true.
No.
And it was a difficult thing to face, I think.
Yeah, I think that can be the case, can't it, with you know, whatever, because I think all of us as humans can have those places where we get our false high, you know, and it's different for everybody. And I know that it can be an area that we can't always face up to immediately, you know, that it's something that in this conversation we're kind of gently invited to look at. And I know for me, when I first came to this conversation, if you'd have asked me then, do you know, is there something like, no, absolutely not, but straight away I would have known what my false
we have
was.
these things at the back of our head going, when you do this, you know that it is.
That's what it is. But I absolutely wasn't prepared to face it then, and it's actually only something for me that I've faced in the last couple of years. And like we've just kind of mentioned with Lou, hers has only been in the last few months. And, you know, I'm saying this as though I haven't got any of the false highs. I probably have, but they kind of haven't come to the forefront yet that I know of. But I can see that for me, I had this kind of little bit of addictive behaviour. And it was one of those kinds of things that nobody really knew about. So you can kind of get away with it a little bit more than, whereas with Lucy, her drinking, you know, she sat and drank in front of people when we went out and stuff. So it's more visible. And I think that's another thing. Sometimes we can be, if we can hide some of our behaviour in that way, we don't necessarily have to face up to it. But it's very much this conversation gently invites us to do that. It gently invites us to look at, is there somewhere where I'm kind of fooling myself? And like, I know when my younger sister has a 3-year-old, she was 3 yesterday as we record this, and when she was very, very young and quite a little baby, we used to get regular kind of messages with updates, pictures, how she'd slept, the contents of her nappy, all sorts of things I probably didn't need to know about a baby.
Cute pictures, but they weren't cute.
No, they weren't so great.
She is a cutie pie.
Yeah. But one of the things that she kind of used to tell me about was how, as a mom, she got to know her baby's cries. And like, as you know, as her baby would grow, she would obviously cry if she needed feeding, cry if she needed nappy changing, cry if she was tired, that kind of thing. And then as she got a little bit older, just that tiny bit of awareness that if I cry, I get attention. She tried this kind of fake cry, this kind of kind of, you know, I need attention. And my sister got to know that and knew she didn't need to respond in the same way, because it was a slightly false cry. It was a kind of false, you know, she wasn't really hungry or needed a nappy or any of that stuff. She was just a bit miserable, you know, wanted a little bit of attention, a bit of a, and it was like a false cry. And I remember her telling me this story and kind of going, oh, you know, because I think I was in the house with her once, and her baby was, you know, crying a little bit, and I'd been so used to her getting up and responding, I was like, aren't you going to go and see if she's okay? No, that's a fake cry. I can see her from here. She's fine, kind of thing. And she really got familiar with that. And for me, that kind of, that's what we are invited to do, you know, with ourselves. Get to know our kind of fake cry, if you like. Get to see those moments where the behaviour we're being maybe a bit drawn towards isn't actually the behaviour that we want to go with. It isn't, you know, like that punching that person that I said about, that isn't who I want to be. When I'm completely clear and honest with myself, of course I don't want to punch somebody that I love. That just isn't behaviour I want.
All more clues there to who it might be.
But, you know, and I can see that I don't have to be drawn by that false cry, that false high. I don't have to be drawn by that. I can see that, you know, I'm quite a reasonably smart person. I can be aware of that. And as humans, we are all gifted with awareness in that way. we have this inbuilt ability to see our own stuff in the same way that my sister had the ability to know her daughter's cries. Like, we kind of know that about ourselves. And if we're prepared to be a little bit honest with ourselves, we can start to see those places, can't we?
I think so. And then kind of, I think the really great news, going back to our question, kind of like, how do I change my thoughts and my behaviours? It looks to me, awareness is a really, really, really great starting point. And it's almost like, you know, if you've heard me and Beck talk before, you will have heard us say, you know, take responsibility whilst knowing you are not responsible. And that's hugely paradoxical, isn't it? It's kind of like do something about it whilst not doing anything about it at all. And it is very much, I guess, the awareness of it and the prepared to be kind of, because I know the thing that Beck's talking about in her behaviour, and I watched her do that, and I watched the doing and the not doing. I watched the paradox here play out, that it was kind of like she was aware that she didn't want to behave like that anymore. And it was like in a given moment, I actually sat and watched this play out, and she's like, I can either do this or I can do this, and which am I going to do? Which am I going to do? And it was like, always before, when she'd behaved in that way, it was like, this is what I'm going to do. And there wasn't anything else. But having got curious about it, having shown up and taken responsibility, it was kind of like, okay, this is the behaviour you always do. Would you like to behave in this way instead? And it was like, oh. And it's kind of, I don't know. And it's not necessarily, I watched Lou, it was a similar kind of thing with her drinking. She suddenly had these, she got curious and she looked, and suddenly it was like, okay, so this is what you always do. Do you fancy trying this? And it's like, whereas before it would just be, this is what you do. This is what you do. This is what you do. And so it kind of opens a door for us. And there is way, way, way less for us to do than we think. And in my experience, you know, when I've had my things, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it takes courage, sometimes it's a no-brainer and it's the easiest thing I have ever done, and everything in between. And it's like, we don't necessarily know how it's going to show up. We don't necessarily know how it's going to change and work. But what I have seen so often is we get caught up in that and think, no, that isn't what I want. I want to know, and I want this behavior to fall away in this way, and I want to be this person, and I want to be like this. But again, it goes back to nature, the garden, what grows. It feels to me, we plant those seeds, we water them, and we nurture them, and something beautiful grows. Will it be the ones we particularly wanted to grow? Will it be the ones that we, you know, will they grow as tall as we want? Will they grow? I don't know. We don't get to choose that bit. But if we plant the seeds and water and nurture them, something amazing will come. And at the end of the, you know, when you're kind of looking at what's there, sometimes it can be, this is beyond anything I imagined. I was expecting a piddly little daisy, and I've got a massive bunch of the most beautiful flowers ever. And to me, it looks like nature will give us something beautiful and amazing, but we don't quite get to choose exactly what it is. But our side of it is that, you know, if we come back to this, if I'm honest with myself that this isn't what I want, I'm ready to be curious, I'm ready to take responsibility. But I'm also, you know, we can do it. To me, what makes this so amazing and so light and such a really beautiful exploration is it's not heavy. It's not on our shoulders. It's not all down to us. And it's kind of, I suppose, I'm kind of glad that that it doesn't work the way that I think it should. Or, you know, though I used to think it should, that whole, I need to control, I need to choose which behaviours I want and which I don't. I want to choose where my life's gonna go. I want to choose that. Just watching my garden unfold the way it is just shows me, do you know what, there's just something way, way beyond me with these magic little bundle seed things, you know, and what comes from them. And I see my life is the same, and everyone's life is the same. I kind of know there is something totally amazing, you know, your seed, the source of who you are, there's something that comes from there. It's mind-blowing, it's beyond anything. And when we get over ourselves, when we get over our I should control and I should know this and I should be like this, and show up in a that it's light and it's beautiful and it's doable, and it blows your mind, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was just thinking when you were sharing all that, kind of that how little there is for us to do, like how much of this isn't on our shoulders.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking, because I know you've planted lots and lots of different seeds, and the couple that I've done some sunflowers and the seeds are maybe kind of this long, and I've done some lavender and the seeds are, you know, you can't even see how small they are, because you know, I put them on my hand and I'm like, I can't even pick one up because they're too tiny for my fingers. And in that seed is everything that is ever going to be needed to make that into what I'm hoping is going to be a beautiful lavender bush that's going to, you know, draw in the bees, and it's going to be purple and smell beautiful, and I'll be able to take cuttings from it.
And lavender bags, and you can, lavender does, it's got healing properties and all sorts of things, hasn't it?
All of that is in this
seed that's
like
tinier than
this.
A pinprick.
So imagine what's in us, you know, we're the same. Everything we need is inside of us, and we're quite a bit bigger than a lavender seed. So, you know, if that can work for a lavender seed, gosh, how it can work for us. Like, that just blows me away, that we come with everything packed inside of us to be, you know, whatever it is we're going to flower into, whatever it is we are flowers of.
And all that's kind of asked of us, if you like, is to look, to understand, to be curious, to be prepared, to be open for it being different to the way we think it should be. It's a really, really small ask. It feels a lot less than building a whole flower garden.
Yeah, that's what we often say, there's less for us to do.
Way less. So yeah, so kind of get curious. If you are the expert on you and who you are, and that is the biggest thing we are pointing to here. Be prepared to look to your own experience and to truly get to know yourself. And it's only you, certainly until you are ready, it is only you that you need to be honest with at first. But, you know, if anything is coming up for you and you want to reach out to us, then, you know, we're here, we're pretty visible, and always good for a conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. So we really hope you've enjoyed the show this week, and we are planning to be back next week with the same idea, that we'll pre-record, put it out on YouTube Wednesday evening, and then hopefully host a watch party on Thursday. And our topic next week is going to be forgiveness. And our question next week is going to be, what is helpful?
I'm glad you said what the question is, because I know it's in my
I had a feeling you couldn't see it on there.
We have a board behind our behind this screen, so that we can kind of see where we are in the show, and, you know, what things we're supposed to be doing. And anything that Beck's supposed to be doing is written in blue, and what I'm going to do is written in purple. And but the way that the board is behind the screen today, I can't see. I can see that there's a purple mark, but I can't see what it is.
I had a feeling you wouldn't be able to see it, so I thought, I'll take this one, take one for the team. So yeah, we really hope you can watch the show next week with us on the watch party, or, you know, catch it at some point on YouTube. We would love to have you with us for that.
Yeah, we absolutely would.
As Deb was saying, if you want to reach out, if anything's come up, or if you've got a question or a topic suggestion, we're always looking for ideas as to what you want to hear about. So be in touch. That would be absolutely fabulous to hear from you.
Yeah, and we are about in other places too. We have our Facebook group. We are on LinkedIn. We have our website. We'll put some links underneath this. But yeah, find us if you want to connect. We are out and about a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Bye.